This is a production of Cornell University.
Thank you. And the idea of this plenary session organized by IAALD is to continue what I think we have started this morning. It's a dialogue among professionals, it's a dialogue among regions, it's a dialogue among countries. We, as information specialists, we're facing indeed many challenges and of course opportunities. I think out of the 2 days we have been talking and sharing experiences, we are able to see how many things that are happening in many countries in a very similar way. There is a lot of loose. So the idea here is to present to you one of the concepts we kind of streamlined a little bit during the last 12 months related to IAALD. Somebody was saying today, is this a library conference? Is this an information specialist conference? So I think it's probably both, right? And we cannot separate them because we have really to think over what's really IAALD, what is really an information specialist in a world that is really changing very fast. There's millions of content being uploaded daily in the internet. And that information, of course, needs to be well managed. We are consumers of information, but we are also producers of information now. So that arena, after the web started 20, 25 years ago, indeed created a whole different state of information storage, information management, information organization. And the trend is growing. More content will be available as we speak. So how do we manage better that content? Otherwise, it will become impossible for our clienteles to use it better. There is also the business of publishing. The cost of publishing, the cost of scientific, technical, and medical is not a cheap business. It's very expensive. And those who review the increase of cost of journals, they tend to increase fairly high, right? The last number I got between, I think the last 3 years is close to a 60%. So meaning that every journal that we purchase, it will be 60% more expensive. For those who live in developing worlds, it's good that we don't have the money to pay them, so we're never worried if the price goes up or down because we will never buy it anyway. So, but those who buy them probably needs to consider, and those who produce knowledge also needs to consider what is their business model, because the trend of increasing of costs will not be sustainable for them neither, right? And indeed, there is a whole new trend related with publishing, related to the copyleft. It's good indeed that we have open access, and the rise of open access is providing us also great opportunities for us to obtain good quality material for our researchers, for our extensionists, for our farmers. There is also the issue of connectivity. We might think that connectivity is a problem solved. And I was just checking this morning some of the data that the International Telecommunication Unions present last month. And there's still a lot of people that has no internet connection. The internet users in the developing world is 7 out of 10. But in the developing world, it's only 3 out of 10. So when we're talking about these initiatives and these efforts based in an internet platform, indeed we're having a lot of people not participating on this content. Broadband subscriptions in the developing world is only 30%. In the developing world, it's 10%. In the developed world, it's 30%. Meanwhile, the mobile access, the mobile subscription of telephones is coverage now 96% of the population. So maybe there might be a good opportunity. And for the first time ever, the fixed subscription of fixed phones went down. We are having less people being subscribed to fixed telephones. So also, the connectivity is being changed. And then there is a final issue that has to do with real access. We have done great efforts of collecting information. I told you that there is many more content every day on the web. But is people really using it? Is people really learning better because of those resources? Are we able to produce better knowledge because of that access? There is a point of time when we were able to present to donors any project related with ICT, because people thought that just because of the ICT, the world will change. So you go to any foundation and they were willing to pay you computers, telecenters, give you connectivity, give you internet, give you software. Now, if you go to those same donors with that same song, they will kick you out. They will kick you out because somehow we were not able to really evidence that we were able to go forward on the problems we were wanted to solve 10 or 20 years ago. I hope that doesn't happen with the information boom. Somehow we are involved. We need to start showing evidence that information is really there and has been there because we have been able to make changes. So the idea of this panel indeed is to discuss further on those challenges, on those critical issues that we might say it's related to scientific information, but it has to do with all of us. It has to do with the association. So the idea, and my colleagues here were very willing to participate with us, because as IAALD we have faced it, and in summary we had summarized it in three. The future of agricultural libraries, and I think some of those issues were addressed this morning. The opening of access to scientific literature, and the intensive use of information communication technologies for agriculture. So that's where the association somehow we think needs to focus in terms of its future work. So what are your visions? What are your concerns? What are your ideas? We will want to hear them, so I ask my friends here that represent different regions to provide us their perspective on some of these issues that I have mentioned. So I would like you please first to present all of them so they can present themselves, and then we can start addressing those topics, whatever you feel more comfortable, you think somehow are creating a good scenario of discussion, concerns that you may have, and that the association as a whole needs to address. So Jean, you can start.
First, I want you to know I'm not being unfriendly. If I sit closer, the light is just, like totally blinding me, so that's why I'm sitting over here. My name's Jeannie Fander. I'm at the University of Arizona Libraries, and over my career, I've seen a lot of change in terms of, in my role as an agricultural librarian. For the most part, my career has been as a specialist in ag and life sciences, but in recent years, it's actually probably been almost 5 years now. That's changed quite a bit in terms of my official appointment or job titles. I'm now on the instructional services team at the university libraries, and in some ways we don't really, at least we say we don't have subject specialists in the old, in the way we used to, where we kind of did everything. We did, instruction, we did collection development, liaison work, all of that. That's, and as I say, in that sense, it's really changed quite a bit for me, but I still do I always say, once a ag librarian, always an ag librarian. That's where my heart is as a science librarian in ag and life sciences. And so I still do instructional services for departments in the College of Agriculture. I am, as you may be aware from the paper we did on Monday, very much involved in the Rangelands Project, which is a partnership between the libraries and the College of Ag and a regional and now international global partnership effort. So I think in some ways, at least in academic libraries, that may be where the future is. It's the sort of responsibilities being distributed, dispersed somewhat, but there's still a need for people that have a subject background in terms of their undergrad or additional graduate degrees. I think that's invaluable. And of course, as everyone knows now, it's the digital world, and so at least some exposure or level of expertise in managing digital information. I think it's impossible to be an expert in everything, but at least for myself, I went back and I got a certificate in digital information management, which at least helps me communicate a little bit better with the real experts. You know, things like instructional design, user experience, usability of web resources or other electronic resources, those are all critical skills that I see as being important to agricultural librarians. So again, a lot of change, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case.
Thank you. I'm Justin Chisenga from the Regional Office for Africa of the Food and Agriculture Organization. And I think for this first part, I'll just restrict to introducing myself so that then maybe you can appreciate the type of experience I'm bringing to the panel. I come from Zambia, and I started working as a librarian in Zambia, first in the Office of the Auditor General, which is in the public sector. And later on, I moved to the Copperbelt University, where I worked in cataloging, and later on moved into computerizing the university library. After that, I moved to the National University of Lesotho. That's way down in southern Africa. Lesotho is a small country inside South Africa. And there I worked as an automation librarian, computerizing the university library. After finishing the project, I moved to Namibia, where I added the automation system. And within the same University of Namibia, I moved into the department, where I started teaching in the Department of Information and Communication. After some time there, almost 5 years, I moved to the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, where I went to teach information studies and also introduced the course on knowledge management curriculum, which even to date is being followed. And then from South Africa, I joined FAO, and I've been in Ghana since 2002, and I work as knowledge and information management officer, basically focusing on sub-Saharan Africa. And my current job has taken me to almost 30 African countries, where we implement projects related to agricultural information management, knowledge sharing, trying to assist governments with the policy development, policies that are conducive to knowledge and information management. Basically, that's what I do.
I would introduce myself. My name is Takashi Nagatsuka, come from Japan. And my background is microbiology, but now I am the teacher of the library school in Japan, and also I am a JR, Japanese association, same as IAALD. Now I'm the president of the JAR organization. I would explain to some of the. I have already talked with several colleagues in this conference. At the time, I'm very seriously aware that very similar to has been happened in Japan. The very big changes in the academic libraries. It's very similar to the United States and other countries. Maybe this very big changes will be in the very broader worldwide phenomena. I would introduce myself in how to happen in Japan concerning for the academic libraries. In Japan, majorly dividing two sectors. One of the Ministry of the Agriculture umbrellas. It's in Japan, so many national institute for the agriculture. At the time, the former, in the center of the so many national institute for agriculture, there are the single one central library, and each institute has the small libraries, former. But about 15 years ago has been changed to the very big organization change has happened. It's Japanese government going to the more small government, and at the time the research institute has been changed to from the national to the independent organization, similar like such as in UK. And at the time, the very big changes has happened in Japan. The central library is under of the information centers. And the information center has two branches. One is a central library, and another one is a very big data center. At the time, very serious issues has been happened. Many young librarians move from the central library to the data center. The central library is very shrinking. The number of the librarians is very shrinking nowadays. And it's a very big, severe problem. What rule has been done to the central libraries. Nowadays, central library also going to all of the content going to online. To the researchers cannot come to the branch offices, branch libraries and the central libraries. It's a very big issue, but not so easy. Not so easy to solve that problems. Another one is in the case of the universities. Universities are a little different from the Ministry of Agriculture Research Center. In the case of the universities, I have reported this conference to the poster session yesterday. Many universities focusing to the institutional repositories to new ways, one of the new ways. In the case of the agricultural faculty or schools, most of the journals and books going to online. Many researchers and students not so much come to the libraries. It's libraries finding new ways. It's necessary too, but nowadays not so easy too. Maybe the same direction in the case of the universities. Now, in Japan, the same as very popular in the learning commons and active learning, librarians more involving to the learning for students. It's maybe the same trend of the United States and other countries. Now, in Japan also, the academic librarians in universities seeking to new ways, and same as different issues there are in Japan, especially in universities. And universities are now children's number is very rapidly decreasing in Japan, in the most decrease in the world nowadays. Very rapidly changing. The society is very more older ages people's the number of the older ages people is very high, and children's number is very low nowadays in Japan. The universities it's facing to the difficulty to how to gathering the student, and at the time is library is more concerned to the education for the student. It's a new. It's one of the way to finding the dissolving the difficulties of the academic libraries, I think. Thank you.
Hi, Martin Parr from CABI. I won't give you an extensive biography. I used to be a scientist, and I don't think I was particularly good at that, so now I work in knowledge management. So in terms of my perspective, I am a European, but maybe I'm not the best person to talk about trends in European knowledge management issues and the sort of challenges that face IAALD specifically in Europe. Maybe got a bit more of a global perspective. What are the challenges? Well, I think Federico highlighted a lot of them very well in his opening statements. We are continuing to live in a time of extremely disruptive technologies. The landscape is moving extremely quickly, and priorities of donors who are supporting various initiatives and interventions that we're involved with are also developing very quickly. Sometimes it's quite hard to keep on top of the latest buzzwords that are coming out of those that support our initiatives, especially in a field that's sort of close to my heart, monitoring and evaluation. You know, another week goes by and another buzzword comes along about what we should be doing. So we're talking about very quickly moving disciplines, and there's huge potentials with these new disruptive technologies, with mobiles, and huge potential specifically in the data that's coming out of these initiatives. If you have an experience of working with mobile phones, you've potentially got an extremely large reach to people in many different areas, and the potential for very interesting data coming out of that is significant. People use this term big data. Somebody, a colleague of mine in this room at the moment, Cambria, said there ain't no such thing. It's actually all data, but it's a lot of data. So IAALD has the potential to a real great convening opportunity to bring like-minded people together to discuss these big issues and to help build capacity in this area. If I was to focus on two particular things that I think are important current trends, touched on one already, which is that because the landscape is moving so quickly, the tools and methodologies that we need to apply to respond to that need to encourage us to be light on our feet, to be able to respond to these changing priorities. And one might be thinking, I don't know whether we've got any IT techie people in the room. I was talking with John Ferreira about this a little while back. Increasing adoption of approaches like agile methodologies, so that we're not creating massive monolithic grand plans for systems that go into many hundreds of pages, but we focus on some simple priorities around the tools and services that we produce, and then we have an iterative approach to developing those services over time. And then another focus, I alluded to that already, is monitoring and evaluation. Many of us don't have the luxury of receiving core funding. We're constantly having to justify our existence, what we do, explaining what we do, explaining why we do it, and the impact that we're trying to achieve and the impact that we do achieve, even when we didn't intend to do it that way. So we need to get better at routinely monitoring what we do, reporting how we give a value add, and you know, from going back to being looking at the publisher perspective, you know, if information is routinely expected to be freely available, then we need to explain how a paid service is worth it. So we have to make that value for money argument. So, and as Federico said, you know, so many projects have happened in the past, and we haven't been adequately able to say whether people are really using these services. That's not been built in. The focus has been on building a nice piece of technology, on designing it, delivering it, and saying, look, here it is, not really embedding into it an understanding of how people are using the services and how it can be developed as a result. So I think we all need to become monitoring and evaluation experts. I think gone is the time when, you know, programs had a monitoring and evaluation expert and it was a sort of a ghettoized unit and you went and you talked to them and, you know, yeah, and you know, and people would then say, oh, well, this is how you do your monitoring and evaluation. I honestly think that monitoring and evaluation is everybody's responsibility because it's so important to continue to justify what you do, to demonstrate impact, and to continue to receive support for good work. And hopefully IAALD can support that by signposting useful resources and convening discussions around that.
Mm-hmm.
My name's Peter Walton. I'm not part of any organization. I work for myself, which means I work for many different organizations. Even though you might be able to detect that Martin and I are actually not too dissimilar in our accents, so we're born not very far from each other, I think it's safe to say that I'm about as far away from the UK as you can get. So I live in Australia, but my work area is the Pacific. So it just shows how times move. When I think about the career that I've had, and no one could have planned this, I think that it mirrors in many ways how we've got to the position we are now. I started off, you know, as a regular kind of librarian. I didn't have a science background, sorry. I had a degree in Scandinavian literature, which of course was really useful. So I didn't have a science background. I became a librarian and worked in an excellent medical library in London before taking the plunge, almost literally, and going to Solomon Islands in the Pacific, where I had to unpick everything I knew about managing a library in order to make management in the local context work. But even so, in the 1980s, libraries were distinct things, and you know, a librarian managed a library, and that's pretty much the box you were in. But that started to change pretty soon after I got there, and as we know, you might be a good researcher, but not necessarily able to write, so people asked me to start helping them prepare their scientific reports and put the annual report together, or build a database in this or that, and things like that. And that's kind of how I personally expanded my area of expertise. And good that that happened too, because what we're seeing now, particularly in Australia, is that agricultural libraries are going out of existence. In this last 12 months, probably the best agricultural library in Australia, in Queensland, was not just closed down, but the collection was dismantled. Some of it was saved and shunted off to other remaining libraries, but a lot of it was just ditched. Why? Well, it's a political decision. It was felt that they could say the saving that they would make on not having to have a library, not having to pay for subscriptions, not having to pay for library staff, it could be used for other things. Not quite sure what, but that was the idea. So what does that do to the relationship between those who are managers of information and knowledge and those who need it for their work? Well, most people were up in arms about it, but that was a political decision. It was taken, it's done, it's finished. That's in Australia. At the same time, there are somewhat positive things happening, which is the mirroring what's happening in the UK, Europe, and North America, being the development of digital depositories and also digital data repositories. So we're seeing, in some ways, better access to information of that kind than we had before. Meanwhile, back in the Pacific area, the few libraries that were available when I started my work there a long time ago, some of those are still in existence, others are being burnt down because, well, for one reason or another. And the vast amount of information, and there is a vast amount of the early research and development work in the region, is being lost through neglect, through arson, and just because. Now, what's kind of interesting is that the development or the increase in the use of ICTs in agriculture as a solution to provide and disseminating information, communicating with people and everything, is often at the expense of that core activity of trying to understand what information resources are around in the region. So it's easy, for example, to set up a blog or to set up a website or to develop a portal, and not so easy in terms of resourcing and staffing to have people do the donkey work of going through all of the reports and documenting it in the old traditional way, because you need to have access to that. Okay, so everything's on the web. Not everything is on the web. If you're in a small country in the Pacific and you search for something that is of relevance to you, you'll find responses on, if you Google it, you'll find responses. But are they reports and things that are from your own country? Not often. And so there is still quite a lot of work to do, which is just basically hard work on the ground. So it bothers me that that is being somewhat bypassed, and we are doing something about it, but that sort of bothers me. There's still far too few people with the skills necessary to undertake this work in the Pacific region, and I think that is a big problem, because it means that the work doesn't get done because no one needs to do that work, and so I find that's a bit of a worry. Especially the increase in the use of social media is putting a fast-moving landscape on top of a fairly rutted, pitted landscape below, and I almost feel I want to say, just stop, let's think about what we're trying to do. And so then we come back to the need to know where we're going with all of this, and the development of strategies to manage information is still, to my mind, a critical challenge that we face. So I think that's where I'm at the moment.
Thank you. Well, the idea is to open up the dialogue. There is also one perspective that, from my point of view, is also important in a global context, which is also the vision of Latin America, right? And indeed, I can address that issue, but maybe I want to ask my colleague, Luz Marina, who I know she has been around in the region for a long time in Latin America. She has worked in Colombia and many other places. So maybe she can address a little bit to you what's her views on what's going on in Latin America and the Caribbean. She and I, we have talked many times on the need of change and the need of doing things differently, and try to take advantage of this. So Luz, can you maybe say some words?
Gotcha.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think it's a very complex issue, and I think that some of you have already mentioned. I think that in Latin America is the same situation, but we have the issue that we want to address it in Spanish. And sometimes there's this barrier with the language. But the main issue is that we try to put ourselves in just one profession. And some of you here in the panel just were mentioning that we have to be more open, that now to be able to be successful, we need a mix of professions. It has to be, you mentioned, you have the ITs, why we don't have the researchers? There should be researchers in this meeting. Because if we're working in the agricultural sector, maybe researchers, farmers, the people that are needing to work and that we are connecting. And I think that the similar issue Latin America is facing. And we have to think about somebody was talking about the social media and let's stop this buzz, but social media also offers some tools and resources. This morning I was talking with Lucy of a tool that is used by the media people, but if you think and use it in a different purpose to communicate access to literature, it serves the same purpose. The same way Mendeley started, it was for music, and they turned it around to manage bibliographies. So that's where we have the power, and I think that in Latin America, that kind of thoughts also needs to be pushed, so we are part of the whole solution. But I think that we have to bring in other professions. That's my take in English, Spanish, French, and all the languages. Mm-hmm. I don't have much to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Joy?
Sure, thank you. I think what she says in terms of bringing in other professions is extremely important. And from the experience of the IAALD Africa chapter, that's something that we have tried a lot. In most cases, our conferences would include lecturers, students, researchers, librarians, and sometimes other professionals that are interested in what we are doing. In fact, at one point, we even thought of holding a combined conference of the IAALD Africa chapter and IAALD, which is a sister organization dealing with the health information, because we realized that agriculture and health, they go together. I think that is extremely important. But let me take this opportunity to highlight, with the permission of the moderator, some of the key challenges that those of us who are involved in the agriculture information on the continent, that is in Africa, are facing, and especially when it comes to trying to open up access to scientific literature. It is a well-known fact that access to international literature in Africa now is not much of a big issue. We have Agora, basically that's Research for Life, and we have TIL, and most institutions, they have access to these resources. But the major challenge is basically how do we contribute to the global knowledge in this area? Of course, much of the research that is coming out of Africa is being published in international journals, and that is great. But at the same time, due to factors, some of which you must know, not much that is generated gets published. And a lot of it is being locked up in the drawers. And that is a fact. We've got researchers who've got bundles of manuscripts locked up in their drawers. And if they die or they leave the organization, that is it. So the question is, how do we ensure that that content is also made available to the global world? The major challenge we have is that in most institutions, scientists are resisting to let off what they have for various reasons. One of them is the work that they've been doing, and if they let it off, some other people may have access to it, and may exploit their work. And they have reasons for that, because in the past, there have been cases where indigenous knowledge has been exploited for economic gains. And they still have that in mind, and it is still happening. So then how do we convince them that letting off what they have and making it much more visible is going not only to enhance their status and also maybe enhance the institution's status? Everybody is now going to know what they have been doing. So that is a big challenge. And the other one is, while scientists are resisting, institutions do not have any policies to facilitate sharing of knowledge, and especially so with stakeholders outside the institutions. So the scientists, in some cases, may hide behind the absence of an institutional policy framework to do that. And then we also have situations where most institutions do not have clear intellectual property rights policies or guidelines. You'd be surprised to note that some of the research institutions, that's when they are developing their institution, the IPR policies and strategies for the institutions at this moment. So we have got quite challenges that are making it very difficult to make the content from the continent visible. But on the other hand, the opportunities that are coming up are more to do with the technology. We have heard about social media, and if we are able to exploit that medium, I think things should be okay. And the internet access, or internet which has been extremely slow for quite a number of years, there used to be times when the World Wide Web used to be called as wait on the continent, because you'll be wanting to download a document and it will take you forever. But that is changing, and more so because of the undersea cables that have been plugged on into the continent. I think way in the 90s, there only used to be 2 cables saving the entire continent. One was saving exclusively South Africa, and the other one, I think, much of the west coast and east coast of Africa. But now things are changing, and I think that's when we, as information professionals, may have to come in and try and see how do we ensure that the content that has been locked up for so long on the continent is made visible and benefits at least the entire world. I think that's what I would comment on that one. And then a quick one on intensive use of ICTs in agriculture. Now, in Africa, it has to be looked at it 2 ways. Intensive use of ICT at the level of maybe what you may call precision agriculture, that is where it's much more advanced. You see, you use satellites, group positioning systems, and everything like that in order to ensure that productivity is increased. That is being done by a few commercial farmers, and more so in South Africa. But for a large number of smallholder farmers, the use of ICT in agriculture is basically focusing on access to information and knowledge that will enable them improve production, that will also enable them locate markets, that will also make them know the existing prices for their products. And I think in that line, as a continent, we are doing extremely well. There are so many market information systems that are available. There are so many applications that have been developed to assist the farmers in their work. But the challenge we have is there's too much duplication. There are so many systems, like a market information system will be developed in Zambia, and maybe Zimbabwe or Namibia will start from the scratch as if it is nothing else that has been done. And duplication is basically resulting in wasting resources. And I think maybe, as HIAALD, what we may do is to look at maybe a forum whereby we bring in all stakeholders that are involved in such type of activities, where they could share knowledge and information. At the Africa Chapter Conference last year, we had a session on e-agriculture. And the panelists that were on that session, they agreed to the fact that some of them did not even know what their colleagues were talking about when they were on the panel. They were hearing that for the first time. And the reason is because there has been no forum where knowledge could be exchanged on such types of initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Please, if you have any question, comments, the mic is open. The The idea is to dialogue. I think we have put up set up a good stage of dialogue on the issues that concern us the most. So we want to construct, and EL has a great expertise, and that expertise, I believe, is the one we need to exploit the most. So these things that, of course, are constrained somehow becomes really the opportunities.
Thank you. I wanted to address the comment about changing scientists' behavior in terms of sharing their data or their information and getting access to that for others. That's an issue that I work on, and I think it's really key. I think that our technology is far outpacing our sociocultural norms in sciences, and that's a global issue. And I can only offer just a few, comments on how we do that. I think we're talking about a paradigm shift in science, which is a struggle. A lot of cognitive dissonance for scientists to change their ways. And I think that it is coming, and it's coming slowly, and it's both a bottom-up and a top-down approach. So things that help, one thing I think for information professionals that help is documenting success stories of scientists who have shared data that are solving key problems that matter to people, and making those people look like the champions and the leaders that they are. I think training young scientists, and if the older scientists aren't doing it themselves, they're not going to train their graduate students to do so. So I think that's where the information science professionals come in, to talk about training science students to share data and archive data. I think we look at it from a dollars perspective, a money perspective. Any governmental agency that funds scientific work should be requiring that the evidence of that work to be at least preserved, if not shared. That's part of the top-down approach to change, to affect this paradigm shift. I think universities can do something, and I'd be interested if anyone knows about this, because I don't know that it's happening in the US. Graduate students in the sciences and in most fields in the US are required to deposit their theses and dissertations with both the library and a national database. However, they are not required to deposit their data. They are not required to provide a data management plan. Those are things that I think institutionally could begun to be discussed. Because it causes much friction, we could begin with simply institutional repositories. If there's reluctance to go beyond depositing that data so that it could be shared further than that, at least within an institution, we could begin that, and then we could go further from there. I think the publishing industry will begin to push this change for scientists by requiring data deposition with articles, and that's already happening to a small degree. And I think champions, scientific champions who begin to do this, and finding those few key people. So those are a few suggestions. They're not easy. That reluctance is very difficult to overcome, but it is beginning to happen bit by bit, I think. So that's all I have to say.
I wanted to throw back some of the things that I heard and talk about also some of my own perspectives. You look at the Mann Library, even during the summer, it is so heavily used. But the graduate students and faculty are not in the library, because we've made everything electronic for them. We've made it so that even things that we own in print, we scan it for them for free, and we email it to them directly to their offices. So the library has become a new space. It's like the second home, for our students. So the library as a place is still very important, but you have cases at Cornell where the chemistry and physics libraries are now bookless, And the engineering library is now a computer lab, and the engineering librarians are part of the department. So, so these are the way things are happening. When I was in Australia 2 years ago at the Libraries Conference in Brisbane, the talk in the hallway was so different than the talk in the hallway at the American Library Association, where everybody complained about loss of positions, loss of collections. And what I heard, at least in Australia, was that they had all these openings for positions that they couldn't find people to fill, that they had the money, there. My own personal perspective is that I come from a library ethical and professional perspective first, and then as an agriculture information specialist second. And that allows me to think a little bit more out of the box, a little more holistically, a little bit more out of silos in realizing that agriculture has impacts on health, has impacts on literacy, has impacts all over the place. And very often in libraries as well, we silo ourselves too much, and we have to get a little bit more holistic. And that's why we're seeing new kinds of positions at libraries. And now all of a sudden we have lots of openings in the United States, because all these people that were holding off retiring until the stock market got better are now have openings. So there's a huge number of openings in the library field right now in the United States, but there's different kinds of positions. We have things like the undergraduate experience librarian, the instructional design librarian. So we're moving away from necessarily that collection focus. It doesn't mean that we're not providing services to those special, interests, but we've had to become, more generalist in some ways. And that's not such a bad thing. We have to be agile. We have to be able to move quickly as things change. We have to become nimble organizations. We have to show impact. We have to leverage what we do. We have to provide that value add that was mentioned. We have to become an advocate. We have to, and we have to be a connector. That is the biggest value that I see of libraries, is as connectors. I look at sustainable agriculture, for example, and I talk to agriculture people. But what is it that they're really talking about? Is it sustainable agriculture, or is it poverty reduction and not having negative effects on the environment? And if they're looking at poverty reduction, maybe there's other ways of sustaining a community. Maybe, turning garbage, into fair market crafts might be a way of sustaining a community. There's a whole, movement, at least in the United States, that's called STEM to STEAM. And it's bringing arts, into science and seeing what happens. There's a whole university in Finland, Aalto University, where they merged the Helsinki University of Technology with a University of the Arts to see what happens. So we need these holistic approaches. And the more we stay in our own silos, I think the more that we're going to end up being marginalized.
I'm Chinua Anunobi from Nigeria. I'm happy with the challenges and the opportunities raised by Justin. I have to use my institution as an example. We have a repository, but the resistance, and actually not only that the faculty is resisting submitting better, the institution, that is the university, is paying lip service to it, because repository can only work well when there is policy. And in places like Nigeria, they have repositories, but they don't have policies supporting the repository. There is asset, but there is access to resources, but the asset is the problem. Like when I was trying to prepare my paper for this conference, I tried to see agricultural libraries in Nigeria, what they are doing, the operations and services. You know, some people may have carried out research in that area, locked up in their shelves or in their own private lockers. You can't have access to it. So the problem we are having in our part of the country, that is sub-Saharan Africa, is this issue of resistance and the issue of not having repository. So I want to, like Justin said, is the regional coordinator for sub-Saharan Africa. If there is any way they can establish a repository, maybe it's going to be not institutional this time, but maybe a professional repository that can take care of some of these researches in agriculture. People can submit, maybe faculty may accept to submit there, so that people can now, and you can find out if there are repository, because in Nigeria there isn't any repository in the real sense of it, because of the support. Institutions are not supporting. So if a bigger body like FAO, CTA, ITOCA can come up with repository, because I can assure you a lot of research have been carried out, and there is repetition of research because people don't know what is available. There is no bibliographic control. There is no full access control. So we have really that problem, and that of the institution, if they can encourage, I don't know how they are going to encourage institutions to start having their policies. If you have a policy, like in my institution, because I'm the digital librarian, I try to encourage the university to have a policy so that lecturers can now obey, listen, look at the policy and say, it is a duty I owe this institution to submit my research. But if they don't have the policy, we go to them, they say, no, nobody, I don't want to release my research, and they will lock it up. Another person will carry out that research. So it's a real problem for us and for others who are carrying out research. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'm not so tall, so I think you can keep it. I would like to share an encouraging experience that I had recently at my institution, the Wageningen University and Research Center. And it started with a mistake that we made over the last 10 years. We used to have, well, geographic resources, we used to have maps in our catalog as a good old-fashioned library. And we did not notice the change that happened in geographical information systems, where a map became a visualization of the underlying data, and you should store the underlying data. And you can make any visualization that you want. And of course, the Department of Geographic Information Systems were aware of that change, and they created a geodesk where indeed this data is stored rather than the visualizations. And then we were asked to take this over as part of our collections, in a sense. And we asked why. And the response that we got is, who else? We are, as a library, the only organization that has some content-oriented continuity. The research departments, they're doing their research, trying to get it funded, and that was it. Or they are teaching classes and different classes, etc. And the only organization that within the university and the institutes that takes some responsible for the academic record of what we've done on the longer term, that's the library, and that's why it should go there. It has nothing to do with the building where we are, but it has to do with our position as, well, a form of continuity. Thank you.
Andrew.
Hi, my name is Anju, and I come from Fiji, and I work for the Secretariat of the Pacific Community. So we work with 22 Pacific Island countries. Just to look at the points, the future role of libraries, I have some comments and I also have a bit of questions. In terms of future role of libraries, there is a serious concern, like in the Pacific, there's climate change issue. And a country like Kiribati, which has only 110,000 people, is literally going to be underwater because of the sea level rise. So what they are trying to do now is, for example, a strategy they're using is buying land in Fiji to relocate their people. Now, this is a serious concern. So if you're relocating people, you are relocating what? Your libraries, maybe, data. So you're losing identity, you're losing data, you're losing document management systems. All these things come in place. So how can we retain that and making sure that we do not how can we retain all this information and making sure that we're not losing a lot of the information? Okay, that's one of the questions. And they have like serious connectivity issues as well. I'm just giving this as an example as one country. For example, they have, if you buy 500 MB of data, it costs about $35 AUD Australian per month. You use that data, you are practically left with 128 kbits, which is dial-up connection. So again, the excess of information is just not possible. We try to develop portals, and when we try to look at how they can access it, they're not able to access it. We literally get feedback that they're not able to access all this. In terms of opening of access to scientific literature, while we are talking about scientific literature and access, we should also look at, what was it that I was going to say? How to make it into layman terms. For example, this scientific literature is good for scientific people, but for normal people that do not understand how you can translate from agriculture, climate change through the use of ICTs or something, this is also a concern, and we need to sort of look at that. The use of ICT, we use a lot of ICT in the Pacific, and of course, Peter Walton has also talked about it, and my colleague, Senior, somewhere there, from PNG, and we use ICTs, and there's a really good mobile coverage. Mobile phone coverage is more, there's more penetration than the actual internet connectivity. And so I think these are some of the issues that we are also trying to address as challenges. And it would be nice to look at how we can have some real opportunities and some real case where we can look at giving access to them or giving even internet connectivity. I know this cannot be addressed here, and I would just like to say that there is a forum which is called the Internet Governance Forum that looks at ICT challenges, that also looks at access, open access to data. It looks at connectivity and also other major issues like cybersecurity and stuff. So this may be a way of taking what we discuss here to something like that, to some bigger forum that's globally, that's available globally. Thanks.
My name is Deva Reddy. I am from Texas A&M University. My experience, before that, I would like to draw a line when we talk of challenges and opportunities for information, communication, etc. We have to draw a line between the type of agriculture. When we say agriculture, intensive use of ICT for agriculture, it should be, let's say, agriculture, you can say, you can say that agriculture for business, agriculture for subsistence, agriculture for business and agriculture for subsistence. And when we say agriculture for business, in countries like developed countries like North America, most of the European countries, where the population is hardly 1.5% is there, where if you think of subsistence agriculture, most of the developing countries, there they have I think 70 to 80% subsistence agriculture. That means in the developed countries, they have more than, that is about 1,000 or more acres of land, whereas in the other countries, they have hardly about 2 to 3 acres of land is there. So that means all on that piece of land, they have to do their agriculture, and that means when you think of intensive agriculture, or before using the intensive use of ICT, For example, if I take the examples of South Asia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, all those Maldives, all these 7 or 8 countries, if you think of, all there, my experience is that all subsistence agriculture is followed. And when you want to use ICT there, obviously, although there are well-developed libraries in the urban areas, in rural areas, almost all not in a walkable reach. For instance, I come from a village where even in the 20 years distance, we don't have libraries. So how can they use the libraries? First of all, public library system has to be developed. And that's one aspect of it. And the second thing is, when you want to use for subsistence agriculture, so when the libraries are not accessible, at the same time, the extension people are also not so helpful. So ultimately, their access point is only the input companies like seeds, fertilizers, insecticides, pesticides, or even for post-harvest technology purpose, they have to help them. So therefore, that is the only rescue for coming to them. Now, when I say ICT use of that, most of for example, India population is more than 1 billion, out of which about 800 million or so, that means 80% of they have the cell phones. Unfortunately, it is a very pathetic point, and all the 80% or 90% people in the families, they have got the cell phones. Whereas it's a very pathetic country, they don't have even the safety tablets, toilets are not there. That's the thing. Parallelly, these things ICT is being developed, whereas the other sanitation point of it's very pathetic. So that's one point. And if you take any one particular family, in the family itself, even a 10-year child has got a cell phone there. That means they can communicate with the neighbors, they communicate in a small, you see, a village consists of several hamlets, small villages, a cluster of about 100 houses or so. So they can, even at a small hamlet, they communicate with each other. So when it comes to the survival of that subsistence agriculture, then their only communication point is the cell phone. Mobile phones, they are using even the cowboys, or not the cowboys, cowherds or shepherds, and everyone they are using. So when it comes to the point of accessing information, that is the only rescue they have. Unfortunately, also to conclude, also when the internet, everything is available, because of not connectivity, somebody pointed out, it's not available. Only through the cell phone only they can communicate. And there are more than 16 languages are there. So when all this scientific information is available, but how can you make available that information in the vernacular, in the local languages? It's not available. Even if it is available, who is the access point? These are all the factors we have to consider. Finally, the crux of the problem is, first of all, public library system has to be developed. And on my own, recently I went to my village. I donated about $20,000, started a small library. It has not yet come up, but it will come up within a year or so, like that. So this is the thing what is happening in the South Asian region. South Asian region, it is happening. So we cannot compare a developed country available all these facilities, and the developing countries, we cannot compare those things. This is what I wanted to stress. Thank you.
Cindy?
Okay, I agree with Luz Marina, and I think researchers and journalists must participate in an association like this. And also, I think open access and ICT are important, but are more important, or is more important the use of information. So that's why the researchers and journalists must be invited for the next meeting. And talking about the future, and in Latin America, the libraries must change to open access, or to get those computer facilities. And there is a lot of homework to do in the future of the libraries there, especially in agricultural libraries.
Hi, are we still asking questions? I don't have a comment, I have a question.
Fine.
Okay, I'm Emily, I'm from the Gates Foundation. So I'm actually very much an amateur at all things information specialist related, so I'm a layman. But I forgot the name of the gentleman talking about becoming an expert in measurement and evaluation, but I'm just wondering, I'm always interested in knowing how we can kind of do that sort of M&E for things that's, I mean, as many disciplines are, there's a lot of qualitative ways to assess this. But if you have if anybody has any kind of thoughts on what good indicators are on the quantitative things we can look at as far as measurement and evaluation and, you know, in information, if it's the number of libraries, if it's the number of research papers that are coming out of universities in the developing world, or the references that are used there, or trained librarians, trained information specialists, or if it's just kind of, it depends on the project, that's fine too. Thank you.
You want to address that, Martin? Yeah, I think.
Yeah, there's a number of good resources out there for people who have challenges around monitoring and evaluation of knowledge management and research communication processes. I was involved in an initiative, a site called Research to Action that you can look at, which has got a lot of the how-to sort of guides around, you know, how to build a log frame, how to you know, look at theory of change approaches. There may be something more on the quantitative stuff, debates around, you know, can you ever do a randomized control trial with communication and knowledge management interventions? Or you can send me an email and I'll send you some links. And then some specialist sort of research programs at ODI Rapid at the moment about those thorny questions of how do you do monitoring and evaluation of policy impact and behavioral change in a policy impact context. So there is lots of stuff out there, and you know, Research to Action might have some of them, and otherwise, you know, if you email me, I'll send you some links.
Yeah, and CTA also has been working in the monitoring and evaluation toolkit. I think it's a very good instrument that you can review different information services with different techniques, and I think it's available. Christian is here. Well,
Christian's here. There's a thing called a smart toolkit that I was involved with a while back, which is, somebody's waving a copy of it, the purple copy, and I expect it's probably coming up for a new iteration of that soon. And I know Christian's working on sort of knowledge management methodologies as well. You know, good practices in knowledge management and monitoring and evaluation there.
Luti?
While we focus on challenges and opportunities, and we want to identify the future role of libraries, first we should think what the role of libraries were before. They serve two purposes. One is to capture the, the country's output or researchers' output, and two is to connect the users with this information. And so, as librarians, in this area of open access, in developed country, I know that we are more endowed with this material, but for developing country, there is a wealth of open access material available on the web, that if we were to study our users, we know what they want. What keeps me awake is everybody's talking about open access. But how do we get this open access material to our users in one predefined way that our users can quickly get this material and go with it? I know they search Google, but they don't get it there. It's, so there should be a way of us looking how we can harness this open access material to help all developing countries in their research output and, in terms of developing their countries' most times getting to the right information will help these countries and their researchers and for economic development. So I think that's one thing we need to look at. The other thing is, whenever we talk about information, we should always think about who are our users and how do we get this information to them. So in that light, we need to look at how our users, what are the needs of the users? And while we can talk, we can talk from now till I don't know when about how we get this information to our users and what the problems are. As librarians, we need to focus focus on who our users are, try to make ourselves be knowledgeable in what our users need and how we can find this information, because there is a lot of information out there that our users we can bridge that gap very easily. But US, I'm not talking about the United States, because we have, and we have moved beyond that stage. In the US, we are thinking of how we can be 21st century librarians, and that is to move beyond. We are providing access and a place for our users to come and our commons and things like that. So this thing of talking about the information and the problems is not there. But in developing countries, I worked in Trinidad for a long time, and there was the same problem. But you have to work around this, and now certainly, with all those open access issues in the United States and in Europe and also in Latin America, there are lots of open access journals out there available. In India is also. Mm-hmm. So those are things that we need to look at in terms of how we manage this information, how we get it to our users. And maybe that will solve some of this problem that we're talking about.
Yes. Yeah, Federico, could I just sort of comment on that? I think, how do we get open access material to our users? Well, we have to understand where our users are and our user sort of searching behavior. We can't expect people just to come to our own little institutional repositories or websites. We have to put the information where people already go. So, I manage an institutional repository for DFID, but I recognize that agricultural information, people look for agricultural information in places like Agris. So I make sure that material is also available in Agris. Similarly, we recognize that a lot of students Google stuff. They don't even use Google Scholar, they just Google stuff. So you need to make sure that your material is routinely being released to Google, and that you're using the right sort of metadata also to get that material in Google Scholar. So it's recognizing that it's not just about putting your material on an institutional repository or creating an open access journal. It's then about saying, okay, how are people going to find that material, and pushing that material through multiple channels, using technology, or increasingly also using stories to publicize that material as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're getting close to the hour, so Nina, please.
Yes, I'm Nina from India. I would like to share an encouraging experience that we are having in Indian agricultural libraries. In India, we are already into era of digitization and collaborations, and a number of projects are going on in collaborative mode. But the only concern for us is the sustainability, because most of these projects are coming in the form of projects through World Bank and so. So once these projects are completed, our concern is how to sustain them. That's it.
All right. Thank you. I think we all are very passionate about these topics, and I think part of this was exactly this. And I think this is the essence of IAALD. The landscape is indeed getting bigger. For those who doesn't know, the data business is coming very strong. And some people might say, oh yeah, this is the trendy topic of the month. It's coming very big, and so probably data managers will be people that will be also want to have a spot in the following years also in this data, information, and knowledge scenario. Let me just wrap saying one of the things that you all have been talking about is of course the need of policies. We need to really focus on the need of policies in the transformation of behaviors of our users. And of course that means very well to know who are our users, researchers, extensionists, farmers, and transforming behaviors. Then you're starting to get into the psychology world, and that's always a very complex terrain. The library as a new space, many of you said that, right? I remember in Santiago in Chile, the National Library has a kissing room, right, where kids can go and kiss, right? That's a very unique and innovative spot, right, to kiss. So yeah, it's part of the transformation. Probably we need to be exploring the characteristics of the information specialist, right? You mentioned many. You mentioned many, but probably the one that I will say the most important one is that we need to be embedded. And embedded means not only in the flows of our organization, but also we need to be embedded in the discussions that are happening nationally, regionally, globally. Otherwise, somebody will take the job for us, for sure. So we as information specialists have something to say, and we have at least been invited to participate in those scenarios, and I think we can really demonstrate good ideas. And finally, there is the need of monitoring and evaluation. We need to show evidence, for sure. I think we're very clear on the what. We are very clear somehow in the how. Many policies, techniques, standards, methodologies are there to be used. We need to indeed explore further why are we doing this and continue to do it, to discuss it in order to make more sense of this that we love. And we think IAALD is the great place for these discussions to happen. So I wanted to finish thanking you all for the rich discussions, thanking my colleagues in the table for the rich discussion. And IAALD is the people. You see the level of expertise that is within you, within our colleagues. An event like this would never be possible if it wouldn't been for the support of what I believe is one of the greatest agricultural libraries around the world. And I have seen many libraries in the last 15, 16 years of my life dealing with information. Mann Library, Cornell University, thank you very much. IAALD is very grateful to all your effort, all the effort that you have put into this, and in appreciation of that, we have a very nice bouquet of flowers from Tony that we want to present to our host, right? To our host, the university, to our host, the Mann Library, to our host, Mary Oaks. So please, Mary, can you join us? Holly, you have been doing a wonderful job since day one. And Jaron, of course, I know there's a huge team of people, so maybe you can help me bring them all together, and we can all really have you show our appreciation. These things happen because of the people that is behind. So please.
This has been a production of Cornell University. On the web at cornell.edu.